So hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Viz. Today I have a very special guest, Christopher, in the house to talk about his Viz of the day on his allergy journey. So over to you, Chris, to give an introduction of yourself.
Hi, my name is Christopher Laubenthal. I work for the DeBruce Foundation as a data designer. I've been doing designs and working with Tableau, for about a decade and a half. I will tell you that 2024 has been a really interesting year. I had a friend of mine, Erin Waldron, and I asked her, hey, how does one forward their career in data viz? Very simply, she said three things. Hey, Christopher, I know you're uncomfortable with 10,000 people, but you got to go to Tableau conference. And I did, and I had a good time. I learned a lot. My favorite was the buffer line and figuring out how to calculate the distance between lines. And we use that for school districts near colleges on maps. And that's a big deal for us at the DeBruce Foundation. Number two was you need to participate in challenges and you need to participate in industry events. So I did Iron Viz this past year for the first time. The third thing she said was, hey, there's this great thing called the Data Visualization Society. It's a industry organization that's got 30,000 members and it's 160 countries. They have a digital publication you should write. And so I pushed myself to write once a month. And I tried to write stories about how a person survives in corporate situations, stories about how I made it this far, what I learned about how to treat others with respect and how to educate, how to even look for a good job. At the end of this journey, I got it in my head that I should try to give back to the Data Visualization Society. There was an open call for positions and I've submitted my name. I've gone through the interview process and became the slate candidate through the nominating committee for executive director. I'm very excited to give back to those people like you, who was instrumental to this. We talk about the rise and the fall of this story. You were one of the reasons in my book that this landed Viz of the Day because of your feedback. But we'll get there. I don't want to get ahead of anything. We'll get to there.
So a couple of things I want to say. I think
sure,
your whole journey is really inspiring. It started off with Tableau conference, which I know you hurt your leg during that time.
I did, man. And then they had my thing wrapped up. And I will say this though, Tableau, super kind. They got me the largest aspirin you can get and the largest bag of ice. And so quick. Sorry, keep going. But they were super nice about that. I want to be clear.
Yeah, so I imagine it's a very memorable Tableau conference for you.
Yeah, buddy. And you know what it was? It was stairs. I wish there was some cool story like some kid was going to trip down and I pushed you out of the way. No. I'm over 40 and I walked downstairs. That is what caused the ankle injury. Yeah, I swear there was a time where I could like Jean-Claude Van Damme or Bruce Lee go from a laying to a standing. My wife assures me that was never the case at any point in our courtship or marriage, but it sure feels like it. No. Yeah, it was absolutely a joy to go. I learned so freaking much, almost as much in the hallways as I did in the classrooms.
I think it's interesting because even though Tableau conference has a lot of sessions and all, I found that I learned a lot just talking to people along the alleyways or just hanging around Data Village because you get a lot of ideas cross-pollinating with people from different industries. So, Tableau conference is just right around the corner, which is in April. And anyone listening to this podcast, I encourage everyone to at least go to one Tableau conference because it changes your whole perception on how to approach data visualization. It's not just about learning. I think the true value is going there to meet people, to network, and get things that you would not be able to get just learning from your screen.
No, I couldn't agree more.
And watch your step.
And watch your step. Just take the escalator. You'll see me there. I'm not going to take the stairs anymore. Oh, man, I'm glad I can laugh at that now, too.
Cool. So maybe we can start off by how the Viz came about. Share with us how the idea resonated in your mind.
So the stuff that feels personal to you often tends to be the best design stuff because either it's resonating with some part of your personality or it's hitting on something of great interest. And this work is hard. And so the thing that drove me in this was the ability to prove to my allergist that after 6 months of shots that I had gotten better sleep. I've got this Garmin watch and I've worn it every day. So I went to the website and there's data there on sleep. It gives me how well I slept and it's the highest thing in the morning. Then this became a proxy for sleep because it's not going to get any higher. And the body battery, which uses a number of indicators to tell how well you slept, this is how much energy I have to play the game, right? And yeah, I started to design it. And I literally brought this laptop that I have, and I'm like showing it to the allergist, who at first was like, look, dude, I have other patients. None of them brought homework. Like, what are you doing? Why do I get the one nerd? But once we got past the initial pushback, I tickled her fancy from a data standpoint because doctors are scientists. And once she realized what it was, she's like, oh, and the thing that she pointed out, my May that year was better than my November. Fun fact, things are dead when it snows. I sleep like a baby during the holidays. And so she's like, for you to sleep better than November, that must mean, yeah, you're seeing a sizable impact. At which point she's like, do you want to keep it at this level of rigor? I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And she said, well, I'll see you in 6 more months. And that's where iteration 2 came from. And it's November 2023. And I'm like, okay, but now I have the little bug in my ear. I download steps. I download time to bed, time awake. I figure out how many hours I was asleep, and I kind of expand the data set. I decided to really hit the pedal to the metal in 2024 because at that point, I had downloaded lots of data. I had 1,100 days at that point, give or take. And so I immediately knew the design had to be about how do we show a large group, and then how do we show subgroups in that large group in a way that doesn't scare or confuse, right? So what you're looking at is V1. This was the first thought. And even in this one, I had like preliminary chart was, hey man, just show me the score for that window of September to May. I wanted to make sure I had a month or two in advance of when the shots started. And we can immediately see drop off here due to my body figuring out how to deal with the shots, and then drop off here when I had COVID. But again, you start to see peaks and valleys. And so what I was looking to do with this preliminary designs was to get an idea for the shape of the data. By the second time, now I have a wider data set. And so I'm starting to think about how can I show lots. This does give you the idea. Each circle here is a day and it's color coded. And I noticed 3 things about this. I had a week where I took my watch off. Number 2, that they changed their strategy for how they code the data. Right around here, they made it much harder to get higher scores, regardless of the fact that there was a change in how the numbers were calculated, and regardless of the fact that there was a week where I didn't have it. This would become what eventually drove the machine. So at this point, we're halfway through. The first 2 passes were, what can I do to basically prove to a doctor that this is working to some degree? And then I came across Lindsay Bethendal. Yeah. She's fantastic. She had this blog post and radial construction of flu and vaccines and kind of basically the various rings were years and each circle was a month. And it was just really impactful because what ends up happening is when you go with a radial chart, you can start to see, whoa, that's an outlier because these are all the same week per se. So this gets into part 4 and part 5 is when the story part comes into it. And so I tried this and boy, did I want this to work, and it did not work. I wanted very badly to do a trellis. And this is not a smart trellis. I was trying to show how certain months were grouped. Like, oh, this was a really bad month, or oh, this was an okay month. But it didn't work because the reference and the range for these individual visuals were far away from each other. And it didn't really align with this concept of magic sleep that I knew existed. And I hope, taking away from this, the big idea is iterations. I was stuck here for a while, man, a couple of weeks. I had this thought in my head of like, what's wrong? I can't get it. I was like, I'm just going to cold call some people. I went on to LinkedIn and I reached out to a handful of people. And this is where our hero, Lewis, enters the story. I sent him a very long DM and I was like, hey, you don't really know me. And Lewis was like, yeah, dude, happy to. And like within a day, he gave me the best advice that I'd gotten in a year and a half. And I'll lay them out for you, dear watcher. Number 1, when you have font you need to make sure that it varies in color enough. You need to have a base color that's less saturated. And you see that here in this version, where this is grayer and it's easier for the human eye. If this was all black, it would be much harder. And he's like, dude, when everything is significant, nothing's significant. I was like, oh my God, that's the best advice. Also, scatter plot, you're going to always want to lessen the opacity and always have a border. There's one more point that I want to make is it's okay to take your time with these things. Don't hesitate to reach out. You can DM me if you like. I may not be, as good as Lewis, but you can DM him as well. Those are my big thoughts on the matter.
Part of the idea of this podcast was to show data visualization, as you see on Tableau Public, is often just the end result. And people are so awed and flawed away by that. But there is a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, which is why I name it Secrets of the Viz. And like you say, take your time creating a viz, because especially with personal stories, you have to have a lot of time to gather the data, think about the narrative they want to bring across to your audience. And just going through your steps on like iteration 1 and 2, you have so much data. How do you compress that? How do you make it make sense for the audience? You're going to tell them you had magic sleep on certain days. You want to tell them that on days that you didn't have more than 50% body battery. There's so many angles to the story. And as you can see, looking at the daily trend, your body is not a machine. It goes ups and downs. This is also something that I learned while I was trying to get my health in check. I'm really happy that you showed this entire process, because this gives hope to anyone who's watching the podcast that, start small. Take your time, take 3 months, 6 months. I mean, your viz took how many years?
Functionally, a year.
A year to get into
yeah.
Yeah. So, take your time, especially with personal stories. And also just learning through fun, because the more fun we have with data visualization, the more you're going to stick. Because it's a very niche industry at the end of the day, right? And if you get too hung up of, oh, I need to do things in a certain manner, like I need to use this font size, I need to use this font color, I cannot use red and green together. I know that's a controversial. I cannot use pie charts. Yeah, I mean, all those are rules or best practices that people with experience have shown us, but it doesn't mean that you can't break the rules. And that's the the beauty of data visualization on the whole, I guess.
I hear what you're saying, which is amongst the many things, and I agree with all of them. The having fun, the making time for it, the showing yourself compassion, allowing yourself to enjoy it. The concept that any data feels infinite. This is why I think challenges are so important. And so I find it being question driven and narrative driven is the answer, because the thing that started me was I just want to show that I got better sleep, right? And I did. My May was better than my November when everything was dead. And I love your bit about we can mindfully and intentionally break design norms. Of course we can. There was a Nightingale magazine, I think the second or the third edition, dedicated to this very theme. Designs that purposefully break norm and why people do that. And no, I don't think there's a data viz law. Yeah, follow your passion, follow your heart. And if that's a Christmas themed board game thing or a Disney pin collection or penguin migration, I assure you, we're going to love it.
So thank you, Christopher, for spending time with us on this week's episode. And I know everyone has so many takeaways from this episode because he has shared so many nuggets of information. I hope I'll see everyone next week. Thank you.
The lesson there is that the best stuff is always a pain in the butt. I've never had a project that was amazing where the data collection was easy. And it's funny, I met with a guy who runs a business school out here, and they teach a data science course that actually includes data viz as a component. It's fantastic. It does very well in the community. I don't know, it's a regional powerhouse, at least in the 3-4 state area. But this guy, he has lunch with me one day, and he's been around. And he's like, hey, Christopher, in the 70s, do you know what my number one problem was? I was like, what? It's like data cleaning. He's like, hey, do you know what my number one problem is yesterday? I'm like, well, I think it was data cleaning. And so, yeah, no, I'm with you on the pain in the butt.